Sachs Kedushin F Ayin Vav completes our sugya about kusim marrying each other, and then begins the next Mishnah. So we've been speaking about a kusim, what the halacha is. The Gemara had said there were three opinions, up to the third opinion, which is Rabbi Eliezer, and his opinion is expected to bring us to the shita that kusim are not allowed to marry each other because you have a suffix. Maybe someone's marrying. Maybe you could have one of them who's a kosher who's marrying a psal. So the Gemara explains that Rabbi Eliezer holds that the kusim are just not mendaktigin b'mitzvahs. They don't keep mitzvahs well and accurately, and there are all kinds of mistakes. The Gemara says that there's a brisa that expresses this. It says that the matzah of a kusi you're allowed to eat on Pesach. You don't have to be afraid that it's chametz, and you could even use it for the Seder night. It's considered to be lishma. And Rabbi Eliezer holds that that is aser. You can't use it for either of them because he holds that they're not medachtikin b'mitzvahs and they aren't bikim in those mitzvahs. So Shimon ben Gamliel seems to argue. He says any mitzvah that they grabbed onto, they do it even more carefully than Yisrael. So what does it mean when we say that they're not bikin? So in our sugi here, we're discussing Kedushin and Gerushin, therefore they don't keep the halachas of Kedushin and Gerushin correctly, and you end up with someone being married to someone that creates mamzeros, and therefore there are mamzerim mixed into their bloodlines. Now the Gemara says, what is the issur that happened there? So Rav Nachman says, name Rabbi Bar Avuha, that there was a mamzer from a person who married his own sister, who got mixed into the bloodline, and there was someone who married an Eshes Ach that was also involved. So the Gemara says, why do you need to tell me that? It would seem like the chiddush of that is that type of relationship, which is chayvi krisis, creates mamzeris, as opposed to the shita of the Tanam after that, it's only chayvi misas bezin that creates mamzeris. Here we're only at krisis will as well. So Gemara says, then you don't have to tell me both examples, just tell me one. So Gemara says, no, he said both because that is what actually happened. Now Rava says a slightly different approach. He says that it was an evident a shevcha that married into their ancestry, and therefore they're bnei avadim and shvachos, and that creates mamzeros. Chiddush, of course, is that creates mamzeros. The Gemara says you only have to say one of them, you don't have to say both. So the Gemara says, again, that is what actually happened. Okay, we're now in the next Mishnah, which discusses how far into a person's ancestry do you have to check for psulim. If you want to marry someone, how far do you have to look for mamzeros? So this halacha will change whether you're marrying a kohenes, a levia, or a Yisraelis. Kohenes has one level less checking. Yisraelis requires one level more. And the Mishnah will give us 5 to 7 exceptions, things which can establish purity of lineage without having to actually check the individuals that normally we would need to. And the Gemara will go through what the sources of those things are. So let's begin the Mishnah. The Mishnah says if you are marrying a Kohenes, you have to check 4 levels, which turns out to be 8 individuals. And if you're marrying a Levi or Yisraelis, you have to add one more on each branch of the ancestry. Now, what the Mishnah means is as follows. You have to check the mothers. You only have to check the mothers of the Kala. You have to check 2 generations of female ancestors in each branch of the family, which turns out to be 4 branches of the family. You have her mother's side and her mother's 2 parents, her father's side and the 2 parents. You have to keep on traveling back in the generations until you get 2 consecutive generations of female mothers, and that's where you can stop. So the plays out as follows. So the Kala's mother and her mother, that's the Kala's mother's mother, that's 2 generations. So in that line you could stop. You have 2 females. If you go to the Kala's mother's father, then you need 2 more generations of females after that, because that's a father there. So you need the Kala's mother's father, and then his mother and her mother. Now, if you go to the Kala's father's side, so you're going to need, from his father's side, you need the father's mother and the mother's mother. And if you go to and you could stop there. And then when you go to the Kala's father's father, you need his mother and her mother. And therefore, in each branch, the Kala's mother and the Kala's father, and each of their mother and father, you need to show 2 generations of purity in mothers, and then once you have 2, you could stop. Now, that is for a Kohenes. If it's a Levi or a Yisraelis, the Mishnah says you have to add 1 more level. And therefore, for all 4 branches, you need 3 mothers, for a total of 12 mothers altogether that you've established. That's how the Mishnah gives us the halacha. Now the Mishnah says there are 5 situations where everyone agrees you don't have to check, and then 2 where there's a machlekes. So the 5 are if he's a kohen, if you check and you find that there was a kohen in the ancestry who served on the mizbech, you don't have to check his mothers. If you find that there was a Levi who sang on the duchen together with the other Leviim in the Beis Hamikdash, again, you don't have to check any further. If someone served in Sanhedrin, you don't have to check. If someone was a shoiter, which the Gemara will say soon means that he served on a beis din, a small beis din, you don't have to check any further. If he was a gabbai tzedakah, that's proof that he's miyuchas. These 5, everyone agree. The 2 that are machlekes, you have Rav Yosi, who adds if he was a dayan in the court of a town called Yeshana near Tzipori. And Rav Chanina ben Atignas adds if he's signed on the astartia of the king, which the Gemara will explain later what that means. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now let's begin the Gemara. First of all, the Gemara wants to know why you're checking mothers. Why aren't you checking fathers? So the Gemara says because the fathers, if there would be a problem, you would know about it. And the reason is because when women get angry at each other, they expose the other one's misappropriate behavior in arayis. They don't expose their yichus problems. And therefore, it could be that there's yichus problems that we don't know about. However, when men get angry at each other, they start revealing each other's yichus problems. So if any of the men would have a yichus problem, we would know about it. The women, you have to actually investigate. Now, the Gemara asks, why does it only say that the husband has to check the wife's yichus? Why doesn't the wife have to check the husband's yichus? So the Gemara says that, obviously this supports Ra's opinion, who says that a kosher woman does not have to check for psulim in a potential husband. It's only the pasul that has an isser to marry the kohenes, or the kosher woman. She doesn't have an isser to marry him, therefore she doesn't have to investigate. He's responsible to do that investigation. Now, the Gemara says that there are some sources that add another layer of investigation. Rav Ada bar Ava says you have to check 4 mothers, which comes out to a total of 12. So obviously he's saying in all 4 branches of Yichus you have to go back 3 mothers for a total of 12, 3 in each branch, which is like what our Mishnah has for Leviah and Yisraelis. And then we have a brisa though that says you have to actually do 4 in each branch for a total of 16. So the Gemara says, can they fit in our Mishnah? Rav Ada bar Ava could fit in the Mishnah. You could say that he was referring to a Leviah and a Yisraelis. It wasn't referring to a Kohenes, where our Mishnah says the same number. However, the Brisa, no one in our Mishnah says 16. No one in our Mishnah says you have to go back 4 mothers. So therefore, could we say that it's not fitting in the Mishnah? So the Mishnah says, no, it's not. It's not a problem. We could reinterpret the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says you have to add 1 on each branch, it doesn't mean you have to add 1 mother. It means you have to add 1 set. The Mishnah previously said you need to look for 2. So now it's saying you need another set of 2 for a Kohanis and a Yisraelis. That's what it means by add 1. And therefore you have a total of 4 in each branch for a total of 16 mothers altogether. Now, is there a machlokes about this altogether? The Gemara continues by bringing 2 different versions of what Rav said, and 2 different versions as to whether or not there are 2 different versions. So we have Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, and you have Rav Chama bar Giyura in the name of Rav. So Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says, this Mishnah is not a halakha l'maaseh. This Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. It's not a Mishnah of Rabbi Meir. But the Chum disagree and say you don't have to check anything. You have a cheskes kashrus, you don't need to inspect on anybody. Now, Rav Chama bar Giyura, though, says that our Mishnah is referring to, the halach is true, but it's not that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah is referring to a situation where there's an error, where there are people that are saying that there's a problem here. You have 2 witnesses that are saying that there's a problem. They're not testifying there's a problem. They're making rumors and suspicions. So in that situation, you would have to check. But it's not Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim agree to that. So the Gemara says, so what's happening here? And machlekes what Rav said, the Gemara says there's 2 different versions as to how Rav learned the Mishnah exactly. Now another version of this whole Gemara doesn't have it as a machlekes, it's just saying 2 different aspects of it. According to this version of Yehuda, Rav said that this is Rabbi Meir, and the Chachamim say this is cheskes kashrus. And Rav Chama bar Giyura just said, if there is an error, he's not arguing, he's saying if there is an error, then you would need to check even according to the Chachamim. And Yehuda Rav would agree to that. There's no machlekes about it. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to the exceptions, where we said you can establish yichus based without having to investigate, just based on what they did. And the Gemara wants to know the source and the reason for these things. So the Gemara says, first of all, we said if he served on the mizbeach, you don't have to check any further. The Gemara says the reason is I would not have allowed him to serve if they hadn't checked him at the time, and you can rely on their investigation. Now, if he's saying on the Duchen with the Leviim, so again, the Gemara says that there was a Sanhedrin who sat and checked the yichus of all these Kehanim and all these Leviim. Next, we had that if he served in the Sanhedrin, you don't have to check any further. Says the Gemara, what is the source for that? So Gemara is going to have three sources here. The Gemara first says that we have a brayso of Yosef. It says that just like they have to be clean of tzedek, clean of justice issues, they also have to be menukim mikol mum, can't have any psol. So Gemara says maybe what's the source for that? Because it says kulach yafa rayasi umum ein bach. You don't have any. You are all beautiful, my beloved. You don't have any blemish. So Gemara says maybe mum there means a physical mum. How do you know that has anything to do with yichus? So Rav Acha bar Yaakov says a different thing. When Moshe Rabbeinu asked for the zakanim to help him bear the leadership of Klal Yisrael, it says v'siyatzu sham imach. They'll stand there with you. So imach means b'daim they have to be similar to you, and therefore they also, just like Moshe had no psul in his yichus, they also can have a psul in their yichus. So it says maybe that's only then because they are training to receive the Shekhinah. They are going to be saving nevuah. How do you know that has anything to do with judging as a Sanhedrin? So Gemara brings that when he appointed a Sanhedrin on the advice of Yisroi, the other judges to decide along with him, it says a similar expression. It says, itach with you. Again, it means similar to you without any psul, without any mum in yichus, just like Moshe Rabbeinu himself didn't have any. Okay, next the Mishnah said that it's also an establishment of yichus if you can prove that he served on a court, if he was a dayan on a bezin. So the Gemara says there's a contradiction to that. We have a brayso that says that anyone is kosher to judge monetary issues, and not everyone is kosher to judge life and death issues. And we said that what does it mean to that everyone is acceptable? I mean, even to include a mamzer. So how can you tell me that it's a proof that he's a kosher and he's not a mamzer if he served on a basin? So Abai answers, in Yerushalayim they did not allow it. And this brayso is talking outside Yerushalayim. The Gemara brings another brayso of Shimon bar Zera. He also says, it's in Kedusha debate Levi in Yerushalayim. It's only in Yerushalayim that they had this halacha. Okay, next the Gemara speaks about the Gabbai Tzedakah. So what's the reason that the Gabbai Tzedakah had to be miyuchas? So the Gemara says because the Gabbai Tzedakah often got into confrontations with individuals, he was empowered to collect tzedakah by force. They would apportion how much each person is expected to give to the communal charities, and he could take a mashkon, he could take property away to repossess it in order to force them to pay that. If a brayso says he was even allowed to do that on Erev Shabbos, people would often be upset about it and they would yell at them, and if they had any yichus psol, then you would be aware of it. And the Gemara brings a couple of incidents here. The Gemara says that Rav Ada bar Ava stayed in someone's hotel, and that person was a ger, and he was in an argument with Rav Bibi. Each one wanted to serve in a leadership position in the city. And one said it should be we, and the other one said it should be me. And they came for Rav Yosef, and he said, it says, Same to Melech o Melech, you should appoint a king from amongst your brothers, Mikerav Achecha, and it's any type of appointment, not just a king, but any type of leadership position, and therefore it should be Rav Bibi, because he's the one who is a born Jew. So Rav Ada bar Ava, who was the guest of the ger, said, even if his mother's from Yisrael, would you say that as well? Because he was saying that this person was not a true ger, his mother was actually a Jew. So he said if his mother is a Jew, then we do call him Mikerav Achecha, and he can have a leadership position. So therefore, Rav Yosef said, Rav Bibi, who is a Talmid Chacham, should be responsible for spiritual matters of the town, and the ger should be responsible for physical mundane things. So Abaye said anyone who wants to take a leadership position or is a tzorva mi rabbanon should make sure that he has a visitor in his home who's like Rav Ada bar Ava, because he knows how to interpret things for the benefit of his host. Now, Rabbi Zera had people who arranged things for him that he should have a leadership position. Of Rabba bar Avua also did when he was in Eretz Yisrael. And even a leadership position such as the Rish Kuri, the one who's in charge of the measurements and weights for the town, that is also a position which requires yichus. And in a Naharda, they said even just being in charge of the well water to see when you can, whose turn it is to draw and whose turn it is to irrigate the fields, also requires that. Okay, next the Gemara speaks about the Yeshita of Rabbi Chanina ben Antigonus, that the Astartia Shel Melech also proved yichus. What is Astartia Shel Melech? So the Gemara says that was the soldiers of David HaMelech's army used to have a rotation, and they would write their names on a chart, and they would be careful to be meyaches them properly, and all those soldiers had to be balei yichus. What's the reason? The Gemara says in order that they should have chsavis when they went to war. And the source is a pasuk that says v'hisyachastem v'hisyachsam batzava ba'milchama, and therefore they had yichus. Now the Gemara asks a few questions. That there are psukim seem to indicate that there were people in David HaMelech's army that were geirim, which we would not consider to be balei yichus in this regard. Somewhere asks about Tzalaka Ammoni, seems to be someone who's in Ammon. Somewhere says no, he moved to Ammon and he lived there, but he was born to a Yisraelis. Next somewhere asks about Uri Achiti, same answer. He was not from Ches, he lived in Ches lands. And the Gemara asks about Iti Hagiti, and the Gemara says you can't say came from, he just happened to live in Gas, because it's clear from the psukim that he wasn't having kichavim. It says that he canceled certain habits of the Ovdei Kichavim because he was one of them, and he was Megayer. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Rav, says, as well, we have a kasha from another source that there were 400 people, there were 400 soldiers in the army that were B'nai Yifas Tayar, that is, the mothers were Yifas Torah, women who were captured in war, and these 400 all behaved like the Goyim themselves. They had haircuts that the Goyim used to take where they shaved the front of the head and they let a lot of hair grow in the back of the head. And they all sat in wagons of gold and went at the head of the armies, and they were very strong. So you see that they were part of the army, so how could this be? So the answer is they didn't go fight. They just went to frighten the enemy, and therefore they're not considered to be real soldiers, and they were not on the Astartia, and they did not have to have yichus.